Welcome to Accelerate Your Wealth, a podcast by Rebecca Robertson, founder and director of Evolution Financial Planning. This series, we're focusing on female financial independence, looking towards a stronger financial future. Be sure to let us know your thoughts on the show, and please do connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn or Instagram, or head over to www.rebeccarobertson.co.uk.
So in today's show, I'm going to be talking to Dr. Hannah Roberts, and we're going to be talking about the wealth trap for academics. And this is going to be a super interesting conversation for anybody who is working in an academic role, career, and really wanting to sort of think about what shifts and changes they could make. So Hannah is a career coach and professional skills trainer with clients spanning 6 continents and a top 10 UK podcast, Women in STEM Career and Confidence. During her extensive academic and industrial career, she took research from concept to startup, and since 2018 has been qualified and regulated coach, trained in talent dynamics profiling, specialising in career planning, online networking and social media skills, embedding commercialisation into research design. Hannah has a particular passion for diversity and inclusion, and of course, women's leadership development. Let's get chatting to Hannah. Welcome, Hannah. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm really excited to be with you because it's always great to have a chat with Rebecca.
Oh, that's lovely for you to say that. There's no pressure, right? No pressure.
No pressure. Only recording it.
only recording. And do you know I'm at 10,000 downloads as of like a week ago? Or like, yeah.
That's exciting.
Really exciting. It's not like 100,000 downloads, but it's still. I'm really happy with that. And so thank you for listening, people that are downloading and recommending us. I really appreciate it. So today's conversation, I won't class myself as an academic because I didn't go to university. I didn't even do A-levels, and I went to college and I started working in a bank at 19. And so my career, yes, you would class financial services as an academic vocation maybe, but I wouldn't class myself as an academic. At school, I would actually think I was probably quite thick and not that clever, but I obviously am.
You're saying this, Rebecca.
I know, but I think I was classed as not very clever. It's as simple as that. And so when I look at academics, I have some amazing clients that are just incredible. You know, like I'm talking scientists that are set like curing cancer, kind of incredible people. And I just think, wow, how clever are they compared to me? And we do that, don't we? But then I look at some of those women and they don't see themselves like that. But they're incredible, but they don't see themselves like that. They look at me, for example, and go, oh my God, she must have all her stuff together and look at what she's doing and how incredible. And it's so interesting how we put these standards and these labels on each other and compare. And why do we do that, Hannah?
Why do we do that? We all do that, don't we? Comparisonitis, it's like rocket fuel for the inner critic. So it's really our inner critic that's comparing themselves unfavorably to other people. No matter how well you're doing in your own capacity, we will always find a way, if we have a strong inner critic, to say we are worse than that other person in this particular characteristic. And I think when it comes to that inner critical voice, it's really important to go on a comparisonitis diet.
How do you do that? Where do you start with that? I cut out sugar recently, so I know how to do that, just stop eating sugar. But which was actually surprisingly not that difficult. I thought it'd be harder than what it was. But how do you stop comparing and judging yourself? Because it's such an inner voice, right?
It is, but it's also one of many voices, if you think about it, that we hear in our heads. So I use a process in my coaching called voice dialogue that talks about these different voices that we hear, not in a weird kind of pathological way. Yes, there are people out there who do have a pathology, which is one day they wake up and they're a chicken, the next day they wake up and they're like a 60-year-old man, and the next day they wake up, but they don't know they've been the chicken. They don't know they've been...
Right. That sounds fun. Not really. No.
Whereas for you and me and the vast majority of people out there, we do hear all of these different voices. One is that really inner critical comparisonitis voice, but there are other ones. So you might have a voice that says, I don't know, go for a walk at lunchtime, really get some fresh air. That'd be really good for you. And then another voice that says, have you seen how many emails you've got in your inbox with all these like unread things? You need to sit at your desk and eat your food while you get through all of those emails. And depending upon which voice is strongest depends on the actions that you take.
Right.
So if you then break a rule of one of those particular voices, like say you got a strong perfectionist,
yeah,
then you do something and you're criticized by somebody else, then you've broken that rule. You've become a substandard in some way, and that's when the inner critic hammers you.
Right.
When you've got something wrong, when you've broken a rule of one of these other selves, as we call them.
So how do you start to shut them up?
You shut them up by actually listening to them.
Right.
So what we normally do is go, I'm really being hammered by my inner critic. I'm going to pretend, la, 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 I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to listen. I'm going to like shut that down.
Yeah.
What it does is it actually pipes up even louder and it gets even stronger. So actually just acknowledging it. Oh, thank you so much for telling me that I'm never going to amount to anything, whatever it's saying to you. Thanks so much for that.
Like not in a sarcastic way, right? Not in a
sarcastic way.
No.
Thank you so much for pointing out that I'm really wrinkly, or whatever it's got to say about whatever. You've got yellow teeth, or this is what mine says at the moment. And you just say thank you so much. I have heard you. Reassure it that you have, and that you are going to do something about it. And the point is that you can come back to a position of choice, like being the CEO of your own boardroom. And there's a sea of all these different voices that you can take opinions from. And remember, their opinions because they have a specific thing that they're trying to do for you.
Yeah.
We come back to a position of choice. What do I choose to do? Do I choose to follow the thought of comparisonitis and I'm not good enough? We know where that leads. Pretty bad day ahead. Or do I choose a different perspective? Okay. But until we've got that separation of being able to see what's going on, we don't have a choice. We're just being run by these voices. I'm eating my food and I'm doing my emails. I didn't have a choice, but we always do.
So I imagine for academics is, I'm assuming here just from friends and watching telly and sort of seeing different scenarios sort of form in my head. But I imagine that a lot of highly academic women, male or female actually, are massive perfectionists because they've probably got very high standards that either their family has set down for them, or they feel that they need to be top of the class when they was at school, and they want to get to the best university and they want the best professor, and they want so they're very driven from that perfectionism, getting that right. Am I assuming correctly there?
Yeah, I would say you're really correct with high perfectionists, but also big pushers and big pleasers as well for academics. And there's some research recently that came out, and I suppose all of this boils down to, we could just call it imposter syndrome, and that's kind of the blanket term for a whole collection of thoughts, beliefs, limiting emotions that are holding us smaller than we would like to be, or stuck in some way. And in academia in particular, 95% of women in academia suffer from frequent, moderate, or intense levels of imposter syndrome. So it's like you have collected really top perfectionists, really first-rate pushers and pleasers, and put them all together so that their inner critics can compare them at this level up here.
That sounds so stressful.
It's a very highly competitive environment that you don't realize that's happening because of all the kind of hierarchical structures in academia until you really observe it from the outside and you go, that's what was happening.
Okay, and that's what happened to you, right? Because you had a career. Tell people about what you did before your business.
Yeah, so in my past life, not so past life, because I think once you're a scientist, you're always a scientist. So I was a scientist. I had a degree, I shouldn't say I have a degree, master's, PhD, and postdoc in chemistry. I then spent 8 years managing large multi-million-pound projects between academia and industry and commercializing that research. And I started a spin-out company with 3 other female academics and was managing director of that company for 2 years. And then I had 3 children during that time too. So it's on my 3rd mat leave when I had an epiphany and decided to retrain to be a coach and a professional skills trainer at that point. So that was led by a whole series of events, really. But the upshot was that in the end, it wasn't until my dad had a really big heart attack when Elsie was 8 weeks old. And that's what really left me asking some big questions. So is this really how I can make the biggest impact in the world? So in the work I was doing, I could tangibly see, yeah, we're affecting millions of people over the world with some kits that have been produced by this company and blah, blah, blah. But I really couldn't feel that difference. I couldn't see it with my own eyes. So I felt quite detached from that purpose and making a difference.
And so what did you want to do then? What difference did you want to make?
That's a good question. I think it comes down as simply, like at the simplest term, as helping other people. Yeah, that's the difference I want to make. And it was the difference I wanted to make when I was 8 years old, when I said I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't really know. Back then I was just collecting the How My Body Works books, you know. All scientists you will speak to will say yes. They all have the book series and the little skeleton. Back then it was just, I'm really interested in how my body works, how other people work as well. And I want to help other people. And the only way I could articulate that was I want to be a doctor, because that's the only kind of thing I could see where you could do that. And
so how do you do that now?
How do I help other people now?
Yeah,
I do it through coaching and training. So I really hugely passionate about using that as a technique to help other people, because I think looking forwards, or just kind of taking the next step that felt like the next right step for me. But looking back, it kind of all makes sense now that I would be helping people through coaching and training. One, because it's aligned to my natural talent. So I feel like I'm good at my job and I enjoy it. It's joyful. But 2, I've seen this leaky pipeline of women leaving academia, or not managing to get to the position they want to, or leaving and feeling like a failure. And I really wanted to do something to make a difference on that pipeline, so that we don't have 43% of women coming in chemistry and only 9% becoming professors.
Wow, that's massive. And so why do you think that is?
Well, for me, and I can speak from personal experience, the point which is, I guess, the most precarious point of your career is going from a PhD to a postdoc.
Right.
Because you are, during that time, you're underneath someone else's supervision. So you're not independent, but you're trying to establish your independent line of inquiry so that you can write your own independent fellowship and become independent in your own right. But it also coincides with the fact that those contracts are usually short-term contracts. So I started a postdoc on a 12-month contract, and I got pregnant. So this is the next part. I got pregnant 2 weeks into that contract.
Right.
So you're on a short-term contract. There's all this insecurity of these contracts, and it coalesces with a time in your life, should you choose to have a family, when your ovaries are screaming at you. Right. It's now or never. And it's like this soup and this pot of things that are not really helpful. And we also have, you know, a massive hierarchical structure and not the support in place to help women or those from underrepresented groups to really thrive in that environment.
Right. So from a wealth perspective, what's the trap for academics when it comes to money and wealth, taking into account what you've just described there, which is the case for a lot of women in careers when we choose to have children? If we choose to have children, that can actually have it does, whether people like it or not, and they don't really want to hear it or not, it does have an impact on your career. Unless you have an amazing boss, an amazing company that will allow you to go back and do the job that you were doing before without question, and it's well paid enough for you to be able to justify the cost of having a nanny potentially, because who wants to send a 6-month-old 8-month-old into a nursery, like full time, the amount of hours that you have to do to work in that full-time environment may be slightly easier now with some being able to work from home. But imagine from an academic perspective, the women that you're talking about could be actually having to go into not just an office, but actually go into a lab environment. So you can't do that from home. And so what other elements are women who are academics coming up against, and what are those traps?
Yeah, really great question. And just to reiterate that point, I was pregnant and having to be in the lab, which was huge. And when I returned, I didn't actually go back in the lab because I'd kind of given up on my academic career during mat leave. And the rhetoric that you get from people who are in academia who are acting as the role models and the mentors are, oh, well, I returned back to work 2 weeks after giving birth. I just got a nanny. This is what one person said to me. Oh, I wrote my fellowship in the first 12 weeks after giving birth. They don't do much for the first 12 weeks. Make maternity leave look like it never happened on your CV. This is what I was told.
Yeah. I can totally see that. And in corporate, obviously completely different industry. And like I said, I won't cast myself as an academic, but it's that intense environment where from a corporate perspective, you've almost got to, it's no big deal. Everyone has babies every day. What's the problem? Well, not everyone has a perfect baby that sleeps all night or sleeps all the time. Some people are struggling to breastfeed, and it's intense hormones that are just raging through your body. And some don't have great bosses who won't then support if there is an issue. Then you've got to hide it all. So I can totally see that just from I think more of a corporate perspective, I guess.
Yeah. So the upshot was, because I was told you really should be doing something with your mat leave. That's what I did. I just continued to work through my mat leave, doing all the things that I could do at home. I remember having given birth and I'd had a hemorrhage with Oscar. So I lost like a litre of blood. Under my eyes were all like yellow and green. I've got this awful picture that my dad used to have as his screenshot. And I was like, why are you using that as a screenshot? I look like I'm actually deaf. And 5 days after that, I was back on my computer, emailing project partners across Europe to get their reports, to get the budgets. And I just remember like having Oscar sat there in the bouncy chair and just being overrun by this fear that if I didn't do this, they would just there's like 100 people lined up waiting to take my place. So I had a lot of fear around that. And I worked through both maternity leaves, and it got to the point where I thought, this isn't working. This isn't for me.
But where does that push come from? Does that push come back to the environment, or does it come back to the perfectionist wanting to do well? Because I really feel that there's such an injustice in that, and that there's an awful lot of masculine pushing going on, and that's not good for the company. That's not good as a team. It might solve that day's problem, but surely that can't happen these days. Is that still happening, do you think?
Yeah, do you just need to look at the trail of burnout that's happening around academia, and all of those people leaving academia. Speak to anybody and they will talk about getting into work at 9 a.m, leaving at 10 p.m, working weekends. I had a client who hadn't had a weekend off in 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah. This is the culture, because it's so competitive, and it's a mixture of, yes, it is competitiveness arising from our own insecurities, but also the structure is set up to spit people out, because there aren't enough positions for everybody. So by default, you are funneling, but you're funneling in an unequal way.
So let's just say this: if you're working longer hours, you're working maternity leaves, which is just crazy because you're not meant to be working at all. There's a pressure to do so. You're probably having to pretend that you're not ill. And we're talking about people that scientifically would understand burnout better than anybody else, like any of my friends, for example, who aren't scientists, etc. They would understand the impact of that on the body better than anybody. And you actually walk out of university with more debt and less of financial security because you've got short-term contracts and with no real light at the end of the tunnel. Is that the wealth trap? Is that what we're talking about here?
So the wealth trap for me is the fact that if you go through an academic pathway, the kind of, I call it the career conveyor belt, where you just kind of keep taking the next step that kind of presents itself to you in academia. I didn't do that. I left after my degree, did a few different jobs, like a graduate development scheme in industry and a few things, and went, oh, still don't know what I want to do. Came back to do my PhD. But even if you go on that pathway just straight through, you're going to be somewhere between the age of 26 to 28 before you even start to get paid, where you get a pension component of that. So yes, you get a bursary for a PhD usually, but it's enough to live off. It's not something you're going to save from. We're talking like £1,200 a month or something like that.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know what they are now, but it's
not a lot.
So you're starting at the age of 28 with between 27 to 30,000 pounds starting salary as a postdoc, and you've not got a pension at all yet, and you're about to go into 30s. And for me, I then had 3 children, so I've got 3 mat leaves in between. I reduced my hours slightly, went to 70%, but I was still working more than full-time hours, of course. So yeah, Rebecca, what impact would that have on your pension?
God. I mean, huge. I mean, where do you start? Because you're then thinking, okay, do I clear the debts that I've got? Have I thought about buying a house yet? You know, you're almost sort of 10 years behind, and you actually haven't got the salary for it. And I think unless you became a doctor and you was able to do private work, and you could escalate your salary, you know, quickly by doing private work and NHS work. But scientists that are working in a lab as employed by I don't even know what you'd call them, a pharmaceutical company or a laboratory of some description. I don't envisage that they pay an awful lot like you've just described. So it would depend on how quickly you could really turn that around, and really the 10 years that you've lost, or the 8 years that you've lost, how you could make that up substantially in a very short period of time. Because otherwise you could get to late 30s and you'd put very minimal into your pension. You've maybe bought a small property, but you're not at a point where you could do very much else, and you're nearly 40 years old. Yeah. And you know, that's quite a shock to the system. So you have to ask the question, is it worth it? Is it worth it? If you don't enjoy it, but it ticks your boxes in terms of the academic side of things, and it challenges you. Yeah, is it worth it? If it depends on, I guess it's going to come down to the type of company you work for and the type of job you can get. So that, I imagine there's a lot of very competitive to get those good jobs in good locations with good salaries.
It's highly competitive. I mean, I plugged some numbers into a pension calculator when I was I didn't even start to think about pension till really I was thinking about leaving academia. That's when I went, shock, horror, look at this. And I looked at, you know, you just get a small increment each year on your salary. And I looked at age 68, estimated pension income, £14,500 per year. That's what I would have had I just continued to unconsciously just let the pension flow in from what I was given from the university.
Yeah.
Now, just to pick up that point, most people go into academia and it's not about the money.
Right.
I think that is clear.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
In it for the money, it's all about the curiosity. It's about making a difference, making an impact in some way, or helping other people. We're really driven by that creativity, curiosity, making a difference. And a lot of people in academia are not thinking about the money. And it's only really when you need the money where you go, oh, I haven't thought about it. It's even part of career planning in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I can see that. And I also see a lot of women from all walks of life, whether academic or not, that they're in their 50s and they've paid into a pension all their life, and they've, you know, but because they necessarily haven't been earning, I'm talking 6-figure salaries, unfortunately the level that percentage, so you think, oh, I'm ticking the box, I'm paying into a pension, it's fine, but the level that, like you've just described, is just not sufficient enough to cover what you need. Now, when you run a business, if you're lucky enough to have a kind of business that has an uncapped income, salary, dividend, profits, you can go, okay, well, actually, I can chuck 40 grand in for this tax year, and that will make up some people's 10 years of contributions, and I can do that in 1 year. So I guess, what do you find that they have, like a side hustle? I don't want to use the word hustle because I don't think academics would use that terminology, and I'm not a massive fan of the word side hustle because it just makes it sound all very pushy and very salesy, and it, you know, how's that making an impact on the world? But do you think there's another option? Can they have one foot in and one foot out? Can their skill set be transferred to earn money another way, or not?
Well, of course, your skill set is hugely transferable when it comes to academia and all of the skills that you acquire. The issue is, if you're working really long hours, there is no more time or energy for side projects and side hustles. That's, if you're in the mix, you might be having, you know, think about me as a postdoc returning after mat leave. You've got a kid that's up at 5:30 a.m. that you
no way
them everywhere. You turn up for work, you've got to be really like focused because now you actually have to leave on time to pick up the kid. And then in the evening, it's all the other stuff that goes on top. So it's pretty much zero in terms of time and energy that you could probably give to anything else.
And so do you think that more women are leaving academic roles now and maybe relying more on their partners, and maybe then still not putting into pensions, or are most of them changing jobs or getting a different boss, or are they leaving and doing something completely different? What's the sort of trend, or is it all of the above?
So I tend to work with women at that kind of the hot pot mess of what's going on, where you really start to ask yourself the question, is academia worth it for me? And probably the financial element hasn't even played a piece of this decision making at this particular moment in time, but can I even make it as an academic? Do I even want to continue to do this? Or if I'm going to leave, what is it that I'm going to do? Because most of the rhetoric we get in academia is you move into industry, just industry. That's the kind of like, it's either academia or industry. And my kind of philosophy is actually, well, where is it that you want to make the biggest difference in the world? What's the vision you have for the world? What's the skill set that you have? And where is it that you're going to feel most purposeful? Because for me, it ended up being coaching and training. For somebody else, it could be a whole heap of other things. It could be making candles. I don't know. I want people to be able to have all the options on the table, not just this is how you move on from academia. You make this transition into industry and you will be happy.
No, you never know, right? And sometimes you care for what you wish for. You might get there and actually it's not quite what you thought. But I think that's part of learning and life, though. It's figuring that sort of stuff out. And all the time we put it off and we don't make some of these decisions, and unfortunately we're not really helping ourselves. And that comes very much when it comes to the financial side of things. They probably, like you said, they probably haven't thought about the financial impact that that's having, where they are and what their career choice is. And I'm sure if they actually sort of opened up that sort of can of worms, it might make a different decision for them. And I do find that there are a lot more women, I think, in their early 30s now who are making much better financial decisions than what even I did 10 or so years ago, when I was at that stage of life. And I'm seeing them getting younger and younger now when it comes to coming out of university and going, okay, well, have I got a pension? And they're asking the right questions to their employers, and they're sort of demanding a bit more and having higher expectations. And I think that's healthy, that we understand that, you can't always have your pound of flesh and there's not something in return. But I think if you are particularly perfectionist or whatever, you maybe don't want to ask that question. You might not want to ask your boss for the pay rise. You might not want to feel that you want to push any buttons just in case you don't get a renewal on the contract or whatever. It must be a really difficult place to be able to move forward and make some decisions. So what would be if you had someone coming to you that was in that, like, where do I start? Like, I could ask for a pay rise, but what do I do? How do I do that? I could look at maybe another career step, but I'm not sure where I want to, how do I start going into industry? What would they sort of need to think about?
So I have kind of 6 different stages to purposeful career design strategy. And I would take it back even further than making any decisions on the career. So I want people to make conscious choices. It comes back to actually time and energy to work on your career, not just in it. Because at the moment, we've got people head down, produce, prove, push, show my worth, therefore I will be rewarded. That often doesn't happen. It's usually the person that comes up behind you, articulates where it is they're going and what they want, and off they go, leaping ahead. So the first step really is to find the time to work on your career, not just in it. And that comes,
good advice.
Yeah, balancing multiple different competing areas of your life. So not letting go of health, relationships, wealth, personal development, because obviously we need to work on our career, and also the career as well. So I have a time and energy sequence app that I help people to manage that in an accountable way.
Amazing. Any one top tip from that, what you would say for time management then in that particular point? Any tip to share?
Yeah, so it is about setting intentions each week in each of those different pillars of your life, and actually booking it in, blocking the time so that it actually becomes a reality. Otherwise, we just, work's so busy, I'm just going to let go of all the exercise until I've got this report in. And then it's the next thing, and then it's the next thing. It's never ending.
Yeah.
So I would say plan all the other pillars first of your life before any career thing goes in your calendar.
Amazing. Yeah, get it. That's a really good tip. And so if people want to come and connect with you, Hannah, you obviously have your podcast, which is Women in STEM Career and Confidence. They can go and check out, and if they want to hear more about what we've been talking about today, then go and check that out. And we will share the link to your website and your Twitter and your Instagram and everything, so they can come and find you quite easily. Thank you so much for sharing your experience today. And I think what you're doing is amazing. I think it's a really important way for you to give back and enjoy what you're doing. So it's great credit to you that you've gone from where you are to where you were to where you are now, and you're sharing your knowledge as you go. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope those that are listening have enjoyed it. Any lasting tips or comments before we go, Hannah?
My lasting comment is work with Rebecca, because she sorted out my finances. Given the story that you've just heard unfold, I feel much more confident that I will have a pension in the future that is more than what I could have imagined. Plus, I have created a legacy for my children as well that's really important. So if you've not thought about it, now is the best time. Let's not wait any longer.
No, thank you. It's really kind of you. And you're one of my I've got so many lovely clients, but you have some clients who sort of, it's like friendship and client, and you end up, I've got so many that I get on so lovely with, which makes my job so much easier as well. So thank you for that. It's really kind of you. Okay, let's say goodbye then. Lovely. Thanks for joining us, those that are listening, and go and subscribe and check out any of our other podcasts if you want to listen any more about wealth and enjoying your money and doing it in an abundant, healthy way. But goodbye from me.
And bye from me.
Take care.